Modern interpretations as to Titus Labinius's defection from Caesar to Pompey are varied. Political machinations may have been at work, or perhaps militaristic calculation, an impersonal decision based simply on where the dice were more likely to fall. With no clear or substantial evidence favoring any one opinion, it could be tempting to assign motivations that most benefit a dramatic tale. As exemplified by one ancient source, Cassius Dio, a historian of Rome, who claimed that Labinius was testing Caesar's patience by being too strong-willed and opinionated, and eventually the tensions came to a head, leading to Labinius's desertion. It is unlikely we will ever know for certain what prompted one of Caesar's most trusted lieutenants to cross party lines, but we can at least try to piece together his life and contextualize alongside what historians do know about the period in which he lived. Though little is known about him prior to the year 63 BCE, Titus Labinius is thought to have been born sometime between the years 98 and 100 BCE. His town of origin is not completely certain, but according to a speech given by Cicero, he was probably from Picenum, and more specifically Singulum, a city that Caesar once asserted Labinius rebuilt with his own money, telling us that he had quite a bit of coin to spare. His family was of equestrian rank, a word that means horseman. They were knights and technically nobility, though of lower standing than patricians. Following a career in the military, equestrians often found themselves serving the emperor in political or civil positions of authority. It was also possible for them to become senators, regardless of country or origin. This is the path that Labinius would follow as well. His earliest documentation of military service was under the proconsulship of Publius Servilius Vatia in Cilicia from the year 78 to 75. Now, Caesar also briefly served there in 78, but it is unclear whether this marked the start of Labinius's relationship with the future emperor, since nothing is recorded on Labinius for about 15 years following the campaign. And it isn't until 63 BCE that he shows back up in historical sources, coinciding with the beginning of his career as a tribunate of the people. Both Labinius and Caesar had close ties to Pompey, and the three working together soon led to an accusation of treason, or perduellio, which included all crimes against the Roman state. Now, this was towards the senator Gaius Rabirius, and was made at the behest of Caesar by Labinius. Close to 40 years prior, a tribune named Lucius Appius Saturninus was stoned to death in a riot following the elections of 99. Now, interestingly, Labinius's uncle had also perished alongside Saturninus, and the tribune might have cited this as justification for the accusation. However, the fact that Labinius was also citing a law that had long since fallen out of use, combined with the time spanning Saturninus's death and when the accusation was actually made, leads historians to conclude that the motivations behind it were political. The trial of Rabirius would prove to be a contentious one. First, there was heated debate over whether the court should assemble at all, since normally in this specific circumstance where the antiquated duumviri was called upon, a decision was made without a trial, and there was no defense to be made. So Caesar's party won, so the court did assemble, but yet another dispute followed over who would be the judges. Because in this instant you had two men who were normally chosen by the people, but in this situation they were chosen by the praetor, and they were to act as magistrates during the proceedings. The two men chosen in this case were Caesar and his cousin Lucius. Now, Caesar was quick to offer condemnation, but voting was then deliberately halted by Metellus Celer, who, it should be noted, was Pompey's brother-in-law. Given that Labinius, Caesar, and Pompey were all in cahoots at this time, it would be safe to assume that Celer was working with them as well. He apparently ran all the way out to the Janiculum Hill and removed the military flag, which was used to signal that an assembly was taking place and that the city was safe from imminent attack. Without the flag, no votes could officially take place, and Rabirius was spared possible and even probable death. Rabirius instead was exiled, but according to Cassius Dio's Roman history, the man's fate was of little importance, as evidenced by Labenius not pursuing the case further after the interruption. No, the trial was meant to serve another purpose entirely, to delegitimize the Senatus Consultum Ultimum. Now, the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, or the final decree of the Senate, was used during states of emergency in ancient Rome. It allowed the Senate to make extreme decisions, provided they were for the benefit and safety of the people of Rome, essentially proclaiming martial law. In the event that a citizen was perceived to be a threat to that safety, it was legal for them to be put to death. Cicero, who acted on Rabirius's defense, recognized the accusation and manipulation of archaic laws as the attack it was, and says in his defense of Rabirius that the prosecution intended for that highest bastion of Maitus, an imperium which had been handed down from our ancestors, should be abolished from the res publica. He argued that because the Senate had been chosen by the people should then trust the Senate to do what was right and necessary to protect Rome. And while the SCU was a last resort, it was crucial to the long-term stability of the Republic. It was under this decree that the murder of Saturninus took place many years earlier. Cicero asserted that it had been an act of self-defense by the state, which, if Saturninus was considered a hostis, or public enemy, was true. But Labenius made the case that the events leading up to Saturninus's death were not all that they appeared to be. He claimed that the man had actually surrendered, and then, while being held prisoner, was killed. This account clearly paints the Senate in a much more unfavorable light. Killing a man who has taken up arms against you is noble and necessary, but slaughtering a Roman citizen who was no longer a viable threat without granting him due process was a gross violation of the very civil liberties the Republic was formed to protect. The irony here, of course, being that the duum viri was utilized, which was meant to circumvent a criminal trial and pronounce Rabirius guilty on the spot, so doing the same thing that Labenius was apparently against. Now, we know that the year the trial of Rabirius took place was the same year that Labenius also carried a vote to repeal the Lex Cornelia, which gave the right to choose the Pontifex Maximus, who was the head priest of the College of Priests, or College of Pontiffs, that originally solely belonged to the other pontiffs, but upon the repeal, the choice was then given to the people, and they promptly made one. Julius Caesar won the title and retained it until his dying day. The timeline here is a little foggy, so we can't know that the trial paved the way for the successful repeal, or which came first, the chicken or the egg, but the coinciding of these two strategic moves by Labenius implies a deliberate attempt by Caesar to cast doubt over the more traditional political establishments while also securing the support of the common people.